Hello and welcome to my property journey from 0 to 100k. I wanted to put together a little presentation really to go through that journey from not knowing what I wanted, trying to understand the property strategies, how to get started, where are the best areas to invest, and also going through that very first project because it can be very daunting, very scary, and it's a huge hurdle. But once you get over that hill, you kind of get to the other side and realize, actually, this is okay. I want to do it again, and it becomes quite addictive. And the best bit about this, there's absolutely no sales pitch at the end of it. It genuinely is my journey that I want to share in the experience, some of the learnings, some of the mistakes, and really where I want to take the business next. And this is something that I wish I could have watched when I was starting out, just to see what somebody 1 or 2 steps ahead is going through. So who am I? Well, I started What the Flip property investing about 2 years ago, 1.5 to 2 years, and it really was about helping other people supercharge their own property business, because even though I'm new to business, I still have a huge background in working in tech, SaaS and startups, as well as working in banking for several years. So I bring across lots of experience and insights from that industry and world, and what I'm doing is applying that to building my own property business and kind of learning the more finer details in property as I go along the way. And what I'm also building is a property development group, so I'll go through some of the strategies in the presentation to show you what I'm thinking, how each phase is going to be separated, and how I'll get through this. But the reality is there is no magic formula and no secret. I'm sorry to say in this presentation, usually you see with the gurus that there's some kind of secret and stay till the end, but I think the reality is you have to become educated in understanding how to run a business, understanding property strategies. The best thing is a lot of this information is free, so you don't really need to pay for that. But it also then just comes down to hard work and determination. And one of the hardest people to beat is the person who never gives up. And that's the kind of mindset you need to have when building a business. And that's how I treat my businesses, whether it's building the property website, whether it's posting YouTube videos, whether it's building the property company itself. The moment you give up is the moment that you've lost, and I'm a huge, huge fan of that. And that is no magic formula. It is the reality of building any business in this world. So day one, this is a snapshot of my company account. So I opened the company, and then it actually took a year to truly get started, mainly because of COVID. The whole property market shut down, and there was a little bit of a delay. The stock market also crashed as well, so I had to wait for that to recover. So bang on 365 days later, when I submitted the company accounts, I was just about to get started in the very first property deal. So this is a snapshot of my company accounts at that point in time. I just put a 43k director's loan into the company, and then I'd also started spending some of the expenses on solicitors, a broker, and going through the purchase process. So what's really interesting that I'm comparing my company accounts on day 0 to then where they'll think, well, I think they'll land towards the end of this financial year for me, which is in September, October. But this is the start of something great, and I want to keep this screenshot for a long time to see where the company and the group started. And this is just a year later. We're not quite at the end of the accounts yet, but this is where I think we'll roughly be landing. So I have one finished and done asset that sat in the company. It was a huge success, and I'll talk through some of the figures in this presentation as well. Whereas now, I think where we'll land is there'll be a rough net worth of around 56k in the company, which is a mixture of the profit from the flip that we did and the renovation on the property, as well as rental income that will be sat as cash in the bank account. The property value, which will sit as the asset on the company, is around £180,000. That has massively skyrocketed and completely superseded any expectations that I had when I was doing this first project. And then the liabilities, which is the 81k mortgage on the property, as well as then the 43k director's loan, which I'm owed. So when you take that 43k director's loan from the company, plus the net worth in the company and the spare capital at 56k, that's just over 100k of cash now. If I completely sold up the property and wound down the company and got all the cash back, I'd have over 100k back in my bank account, which is really satisfying to know that I've managed to do that just on the first project. And I really look forward and really excited to grow this into the future, and that has always been the plan. So I wanted to share some of the primary performance metrics. Now, I'll talk about this quite a lot throughout the presentation, and without assuming that you know what these metrics mean, I just want to give a quick mention really as to what they are. So ARR and MRR, this actually comes from the SaaS startup world, and this is kind of my tech background. So all of the Silicon Valley tech startups use ARR and MRR as one of their primary metrics, and this is annual recurring revenue or monthly recurring revenue. Now, this comes from subscription-based software, like if you're going to pay for Spotify or Amazon Prime, that's how they measure this. I think it's just a nice figure to measure it in the business as well with rental income. Now, you could class this as turnover, whatever it is. I like to call it ARR, MRR because of my tech background. This is the total monthly recurring revenue. And as I start to build the portfolio and get more rental income from buy-to-lets and HMOs that I'll discuss later on, that's going to be tracked against the MRR figure, and understanding how much money is coming into the company every single month and every single year that's recurring through the rental revenue. Next is return on investment. I'm a huge fan of using ROI as the primary indicator to understand how much are you making on the money that you've invested into it. And this is a really great way because you can compare this against cash ISAs and what the banks are offering in savings account. You can compare it against the stock market and the gains that it's getting, so you can have a like-for-like comparison. So if I put £10,000 into the stock market and £10,000 into property, then I can use ROI to compare the two and see which one is performing the best. I'm not a huge fan of other ones. You might see yield chucked around, which is used on the rental income. For me, it's not the most useful figure. It doesn't give me much, whereas ROI, I can compare it against other investments that aren't within the property industry. Next, you've got assets and liabilities. This is really tracking the company finances, and this is personal finance, company finance 101, understanding what is it that puts money into my pocket and what is it that takes money out of my pocket, and understanding the difference between an asset and a liability. I've got some friends who think that their financed PCP'd sports cars are assets when in fact they're liabilities, and that is really crucial because understanding that will set you up right to seriously build a real business, especially a property investing business that needs you to manage and understand finance and the accounts and manage risk and reward. And then off the back of that is net worth. That is the all-important figure. It's understanding how much profit is in the company, how much has been made. A lot of this will be pre-tax in any numbers that I show in the presentation. Because tax is different for everyone, it's probably hard for me to show you what taxes I pay because the company will have different expenses to either your company or your personal investment if you don't do it through a limited company. So net worth helps me understand how much has the company made so far and how much capital really have I got to play with on top of what I put into the company. So why did I choose property? Well, it all started a few years ago, and I bought a flat in London and always wanted to rent out a spare room. I was renting for a few years in East London near the Olympic Village, and had been working for Lloyds Banking Group for quite a few years, and I wanted to get out of the rental sector and instead own my own flat. In London, flats are really expensive, so I wanted to subsidise a lot of the mortgage and the costs by having the spare room and somebody rent it out. In the end, I got a shared ownership flat, and I was really lucky because I got permission from the Housing Association to rent out the spare room. And speaking to L&Q and a few others, a lot of them aren't really keen on this through shared ownership. You could do it behind closed doors and probably get away with it, but I just wanted to make sure that it was above board and there was nothing that could add any risk to me or them wanting the flat back through breaching some of the agreements, but they're absolutely fine with renting the room out. So I rented it out for 3 years at almost around £14,000 a year, which might sound like a lot for a room, but in London that's roughly the going rate. It's a luxury development. We have concierge, we have a gym, we have gardens and a pond. So it's the place where we live is a few leagues above kind of typical flats and the dire accommodation that you see in London. So it was luxury accommodation and therefore had the rent for it. And it's quite common for the area. So over those 3 years, that was almost £42,000 in gross rental income. And that really, really opened my eyes to actually this is an amazing strategy and a thing that can help generate a good amount of money and eventually replace the 9 to 5 in future. The flat also gained massive capital growth as well, and we're just about to sell it now and move into a doer-upper project that I'll be sharing at some point in the future. But this flat, originally I put £40,000 into it as the deposit for my share of the flat, and now it's put about 112k back in my pocket from that original £40,000. So I've also done really well, not from rental income, but also from capital appreciation. So when you add £42,000 in rent, and then the rough 60, call it kind of £72,000, you're talking over £100,000 of extra cash purely from this flat in 3 years. And that really opened my eyes to the power of property, both from a cash flow and capital growth perspective. So with property investing, it really comes down to risk and reward. And when a lot of people are looking to get started, and I was very guilty of this myself as well, a lot of people see the Instagram community and these big developers posting beautiful houses, huge scale developments, hundreds of thousands of pounds. You don't have to jump in at the deep end. That's not the starting point. Some of these people might have been doing this for many years. They might be very lucky and have a huge amount of capital to get started with and hire a team around them to do a lot of the hard work for them. Whereas for me, I wanted to start small and kind of build up to that point in the future. And really understanding this very simple graph, you can start off at the bottom left and have a low risk project, get a really simple buy-to-let development. It could even be a new build, so you know that it's going to be under warranty for any fixes and it's not going to break. It could be a leasehold flat so that the building is looked after as well, and just simply rent it out. That is the simplest strategy versus going all the way to a high risk, which would be taking on a piece of land that has no planning and getting bridging finance on it that you're paying extortionate interest payments monthly on a gamble that you're going to get planning and be able to get some uplift on the actual land itself. But obviously with that comes the reward. So you have low risk, low reward, high risk, high reward. And that is the crux of property investing. And that's why and how developers and investors are rewarded is taking on that risk and mitigating it. And if you understand how to mitigate risks and how to spot the risks in the first place, and that's what I spent my 7 years in banking doing, was mitigating risk, then risk isn't a scary thing that you should be afraid of or be worried about, because it's okay to take on high risk if you're aware of what those risks are and you have a solution to every risk that could pop up. And that's how you run a successful, safe business. The next thing I wanted to explain was leverage. This is one thing that still blows my mind to this day, that banks will give you money to buy assets that make incredible amounts of money, both through capital appreciation, which you get to keep all of that capital, and also then the rental income on the property as well. If you went to try and buy some stocks and shares and you had £10,000, the bank wouldn't give you a 75% mortgage to buy additional stocks and shares to turn that 10 into £40,000. Likewise, if you wanted to go to Las Vegas and gamble it away, there's no way they would give it to you because it's too risky. But with property, it's secured lending. It's against the bricks and the mortar, which makes it a safer investment for you and the banks, because it means that if the figures are done correctly, you'll be able to recoup your funds when the house needs to be sold in an emergency to recover all the funds, whatever it is. And that's why banks lend against it. But it's a great way to turn your 25% of the income into 100%, timesing it by 4 because you have the bank supporting you. And it's really rare to have any kind of business where banks will pump 4 times the amount of income and capital that you have to help you build a business even further. And to bring that to life, with a typical buy-to-let, rather than putting your 25%, so call that out of £10,000, call it 2,500 to keep it simple, you instead, rather than having a 2.5 grand in stocks and shares, could put 10 grand into property. Likewise, if you have a 25k deposit, you can put 100 grand into property, and you'll benefit from the entire capital appreciation on the entire asset rather than just 25%. Even with development, as you get more experience and you unlock better lending is a very it's an amazing tool that we have in the economy that businesses can use. And with some development, if you're lucky with the lender and you have the right project and the right numbers, you can have your 25% deposit on the land. You'll then get 75% towards the rest of the land if it has planning, and then you'll also get, with a very good lender, 100% of the development costs, up to 75% of the loan to gross development value, which means if you built some houses and they were worth, 4 houses, 250k each, worth £1 million, they would give up to £750,000 towards that £1 million figure, which means you've got all the money to build the houses, pay the build teams, get all the contractors in. So this is a really good way to leverage finance and stretch your small little bit of money into a huge project. And that's the joy and beauty of development and investing. So this is my first project and how it roughly worked in the figures. So I put a £26,500 deposit down on a £106,000 purchase. So started really small, really easy. You can just about still, especially in the north or in Liverpool and other areas, you can still buy a small terraced house in Liverpool for under 100k and pretty much put less than £20,000 into this. You don't need huge amounts of money to get started. So I put 26.5 into mine. That was a 25% deposit. The bank gave me 79.5k for the mortgage plus fees, which I think was 1.5k from memory, which meant that my mortgage was around £81,000 in total. And I then spent £17,000 of my money on the refurb. Now, I did this using a normal mortgage. You can also bridge it, and if you bridge it, you can also get funding for the refurb. But I wanted to sit on this for 2 years, and I'll refinance it in 2023 and pull out as much of the money as possible. But the great thing is, you can see that teal starting bit there, which is £26,500 on the deposit. The whole property is now worth £175,000, and I have and will control all of that additional equity and capital created on the property, as well as the rental income. I still owe the bank that original 81k back, and that's not going to increase. It's an interest-only mortgage, and it's going to be a fixed amount that I repay back. So the house keeps getting more and more expensive, goes up in price, plus the rental income, but I still owe that original amount of money back to the bank, and that's not going to increase with the property going up in value. But I made a 90% return on investment on this property, and the golden standard is about 30%. So not something that is common or should be idolised. It was a complete fluke in my eyes. I was going for about 20% return on investment really on this one. There wasn't much in it. The property market was really hot, and I wanted to just get a property and sit on it for 2 years. And that's why I didn't bridge this. It's why I put it onto a mortgage and funded the refurb on my own cash to tie my own money up in this project for 2 years, knowing that I'd have to wait to kind of recoup some of those funds, but it just performed in the market way better. And that's because it's in a desirable area. It's near great schools. It's the best product and the best house in the area by a country mile. It is way better than anything that you can see in the area. And to give you an idea of the refurb, the top left is where we started with the kitchen. It was really old. It was an old, tired landlord who just hadn't looked after the property. It doesn't look too bad in that small photo, but the house was disgusting. They had some really bad tenants in there who had wild dogs kind of roaming around the back garden. They used to dump waste in the back garden as well. The house was filthy. It had rat droppings everywhere. The carpets were infested with silverfish. It was really, really bad. And I completely gutted the place. I wanted to do a lot of this myself rather than just getting a builder in as well, because I learned so much from the process. So you can see there we gutted the entire house, took it almost back to brick, and there should be some other photos later in the pack that show you actually we took a lot of the plaster off the walls as well in that bottom photo, because there was water leaking behind the walls. It was just, the whole property hadn't been loved in many years, and then transformed it to a really nice, modern, cozy family home on the right hand side there that a family would be really, really proud to live in. And again, rather than just buying a really cheap terrace house in a really rough part of town, I wanted to buy a house that was it's a 3-bed semi, massive garden that I know I'm going to have prime tenants again and again and again. Here's another example here. So we took all the carpets out. You can kind of see how mucky and just dirty things are on the left hand side, versus when we finish with it, it's bright, it's gleaming, it's glistening, it's really clean, and it's a really nice family home once again. And I really love this. It's a really creative process. I mean, I'm only putting white paint on the walls and kind of refurbishing everything, but it's quite creative to take an old, unloved, dirty house and put it back into something new. And it's something where I'm naturally a creative person, and you can probably see that from some of the brands and companies that I'm building. Have a degree in graphic design as well, and now work for a tech startup in product. It's just an addition to being creative and creating an amazing product, really. I see houses as my products. And this was the bathroom and the kitchen from different angles. You can see there a really old council-fitted bathroom that hadn't been touched forever, was really, really nasty. Whole thing was ripped out. We took it half back to brick, and then I completely renovated it. We had a really nice green bathroom, wanted to just put some colour in rather than just having a really simple white and grey buy-to-let, and putting black fittings in. It looked really, really good and stood out miles above anything else in the area for the buy-to-lets, which demanded one of the highest rents in the area, and actually now has pushed up the entire ceiling for the area, which is incredible because other houses are now matching the rents that this house has got without the same quality, which means I can pump mine even higher in the future to get the best for the house and make the asset perform for what it's worth. It's a high quality home. It's very luxury. It's in a fantastic location near a great school, and obviously that naturally demands a higher price for that luxury. Again, another angle there on the bottom from the kitchen. completely gutted it, put in a beautiful Howdens super matte grey, I think this was the Greenwich range kitchen. A lot of the bathroom was fitted from Plum World as well, and really simple stuff. Might seem daunting to others, but it's easy to rip stuff out. Fitting a kitchen I found really easy. It's all built together anyway. You just have to screw the cabinets together, put the doors on. I did get a joiner for the worktop, and it was easy to fit everything else. It's just kind of screws and clips, and it's kind of like a big Lego set more than anything. I was really worried going through that process that I would have no interest whatsoever in the property, and the proof is in the pudding. The moment I put it on the market, all of that hard work, all of that planning, going through that process, the fear of kind of getting in the door was all quashed, and the reality and the dream was realised the moment I put it on the market. So I used Open Rent to advertise it on Zoopla and Spare Room, and I had 75 inquiries in 2 weeks. The property had that many inquiries. I realised that Open Rent have a policy where when you get to 100, you have to put up a brand new listing. So I almost hit the peak and the cap, and there are very few properties on Open Rent that actually have this. I call it an issue. It's a very good issue to have, but to almost maximise your inquiries is very rare, and it clearly showed that all the hard work, the quality of the house and the location completely paid off. The average rent in the area was around £560. I spoke to 2 estate agents, and they said, one said I'd get £450 for it, the other kind of went for about £560, £570, possibly pushing £600, and I decided to put it on at £780, and it clearly had no problem whatsoever going for that price. There was no issues with it whatsoever. So I had the highest rent, amazing amount of inquiries, the best product around, which clearly showed. I'm also self-managing this, being the first property, because I don't need an agent to manage one house with that had been completely renovated. We had brand new plumbing in, the electrics were almost new, the boiler's 3 years old. It's not going to need loads of maintenance, so I'm happy to self-manage it. I've got prime quality tenants earning way above the requirements for this kind of rent, which means that they're future-proofed against all the current energy rises and the cost of living crisis and the bills. They've got more than enough disposable income to factor in and bake in all that extra cost on top of the rent, so they're very, very safe tenants. And it took 7 days from advertising it to choosing a really high quality tenant, and there was a whole process around this, around eliminating people who had really bad affordability and couldn't afford to pay for it. I had some people who would have a gross income of kind of $1,500 a month, and there's no way I would rent a property to them, because it's not responsible for me and it's not wise for them, because I knew the bills were going to be going up, and it's not fair to put this on someone who then can't afford it. It becomes it's a risk for them, and then financially it's a risk for me financially as well. It's just not worth it. So who am I, and what are my kind of unfair advantages? And there's a really awesome book around unfair advantages and just understanding what skills do you have to play off that can help you build your own property business. And I'm originally from the north. I've been living in London the past few years, but we're moving back up eventually. But I've kind of grown up in an area where property prices were cheaper, were very affordable. The north has always been a lot cheaper than the north. That's starting to change now with lots of capital growth, but it means you've got cheaper properties and the best capital growth in the entire country right now, which is a kind of beautiful thing to have, because it's easier in terms of the bar to entry, but then you also have the highest returns as well, so it's a win-win from that perspective. And I currently work in tech. I work for a VC-backed startup from some of the largest VC funds in the world, and it's incredible to see a company that goes from a startup to a huge unicorn scale-up. And when I joined, they just hit their $1 billion valuation, and are now worth $3 billion and growing at an incredible rate. So I look after payments, fraud, and compliance. I used to work in banking for 7 years. I worked for Lloyd's Banking Group, did some huge regulatory projects. I worked in commercial lending, worked on fraud. So I've kind of been on the other side of working for a bank and seeing how banks operate. So I've gone from like scaling and growing small businesses to working in big corporate businesses in the FTSE 100. So I bring with me a lot of experience in management, leadership. I'm currently a senior manager, and what I'm doing is bringing all of that experience of managing products and projects and programs and understanding how to build complex systems, manage very, very complex architecture as well in the bank, to kind of putting all of that experience and mindset into my own business as well. And that's my unfair advantage, that I have those skills that a lot of people might not have, and understanding how do you operate a business properly. And working in banking, it's all about risk management. So because property investing is all about risk, when you really master the art and understand and appreciate that risk is a thing and understanding how to manage it and mitigate it, as I've said earlier, that's a huge thing and will really help you future-proof your business, stop yourself going bankrupt, stop yourself getting a bad deal, understanding where extra costs might spin up as well. So how did I get started? Well, I had around 30k starting funds. So I bought the flat in London, I put some capital into that, I was getting some rental income and recouping those savings from 2019. And I loaned that 30k into my property group. Just at this time, the pandemic hit. So the money was kind of paused for quite a long time. And I was waiting for the stock market to go back up as well to put the rest of the money into the company. So I didn't actually secure a house until April 2021, which is when I had the offer accepted. So a part of that was procrastination. Part of it was the lockdown. I couldn't view houses. And then there was the natural kind of time to start viewing and getting the offer accepted. So by the time I truly started, going back to the second or third slide, I had around £42,000 from savings that I'd saved up relentlessly to run with. You can definitely start with less. You don't have to buy a house that needs a massive refurb. There are other ways to do it. You could buy a cheaper house, but for me, this was putting all the money in, including the refurb as well. So I put 26.5 of that into the deposit, and then I knew that I needed quite a hefty refurb on this house. And what the flip property investing? So this is a website that I created. It's propertyinvesting.io or wtfpropertyinvesting.com. It's a kind of project website of mine that really is sharing that story, sharing awesome content and building a property business and trying to provide as much free content as possible so people can learn from me. I can document my journey and learnings along the way. And people can also kind of follow this journey and do their own thing. And really started from this book from Austin Kleon, which is called Show Your Work. And it's part of a trilogy of books. They're really, really fascinating and definitely a read. And some of the things that I learned from Show Your Work was sharing freely and all about, we have this amazing thing called the internet. And the joy of it is that you can put your work online and tell the world, and people will start to see this, and you can build an audience and build a tribe around what you're doing, inspire other people and help them to do the same thing. And it helps me learn at the same time because I can reflect on my thoughts. My audience give me open feedback as well, and kind of will give me feedback on things that I'm doing, which helps me learn and improve as well. So it means that I can teach openly, and this is one of the learnings in the book. It's, not being afraid of teaching others how you do something. You don't have to be an expert in whatever you do. You don't have to be the best in the industry to teach people online. I'm kind of following the path of, I'm new to the industry, I'm going from 0 to 1, and I look forward to going from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 and building that business and people sharing that journey with me and inspiring others. I'm not an expert by any means, but I have a lot of experience outside of the property world that I bring into the business, and that's a unique angle that other people in property who are very experienced might not have, but have just had more time building up a property portfolio. And also crediting vigorously as well. There were loads of frameworks. There's lots of materials and resources out there. A lot of us these days, we don't create ideas. All we do is compile them and kind of reformat them. And what I'm trying to do is take all these amazing things I learned from my business and from working in tech and working in banking and helping others learn frameworks and managing a business and learning the skills and educating others. And they're not my ideas, but I've learned them over time, and all I'm doing is compiling them and sharing them into what is my process. And also creating continually. The work itself never ends. So with the work, also keep on creating and not quitting prematurely. And for me, this is being accountable to my audience as well, so that I don't just drop the whole thing because I'm getting bored with it, or it's too hard one day, or I'm getting sick of it, or I'm not as happy with it one day. It's for me a motivation to keep going, and that's why I have the What the Flip Property Investing website as well as the YouTube channel as well to help others. And there's two ways of showing your work. One is do the work, and whatever creative endeavor that you have, find joy in doing whatever you do. But then there's also the showing the work, and I'm doing and showing, and it's really sharing this with the world in a way to connect with other people, to meet other people, to find private investors at some point in the future. But for me, this is where my learning and feedback happens as well. So it's not just one-sided. I get a lot back from the audience. I get emails with feedback. People comment on the YouTube channel with feedback and things that I could do differently and could think about as well, which has been really, really invaluable. Also, when I created What the Flip Property Investing, it was at a time kind of during the pandemic where a lot of property gurus were really starting to rise up. And there are unfortunately a lot of these. There's also, with investing, property investing is one of those unfortunate industries, as well as like FX trading and like Amazon FBA, where you get a lot of fake gurus who are selling the dream and sell courses. It's very easy to sell education because loads of people want to learn. And courses are a fantastic thing, but only if you're doing it in the right way with the right people and not paying an absolute arm and a leg for it. With the fake gurus, you often see the same traits, which is they kind of flaunt around the idea of passive income, get rich quick, no money down, £12,000 courses, like loads of unverified claims. But then when you do your due diligence on them and you look at their company accounts, they've got no company history. The company was set up 6 months ago. They've got no charges. There were loads of obvious signs. And I was looking into a lot of these gurus and, they're saying that they're multi-millionaires and they have all of this money and cash. You then go to their companies and they have absolutely no mortgages, no charges. And, when they then start trying to create excuses around these, you realise that these people are really selling the dream. So I wanted to step away from that and actually provide just a really honest, transparent brand and education and a real journey that isn't just full of complete rubbish. And on the WTF property investing website, I created my guiding principles, and the 3 main principles for me are working with purpose to understand my own direction and accountability. And for me, working 9 to 5 the rest of my life in a polluted city in London isn't my idea of an ideal life. And for me, I want to transition at some point in the future to building my own full-time business, and creating this brand is helping me do that, and that's what I'm gaining from this. Secondly is failing forward, so sharing the mistakes, showing the problems, showing the things that get wrong, things I don't understand, but embracing that process. You're only a beginner once, and all you have to do is get past that and fail forwards, and you're no longer a beginner. But also knowing that all of these results are mine and what I'm doing is working so far, and to go from when I wrote this at the very beginning of the business to now, where the projects are starting to really pay off already, is really satisfying. So I'm documenting all of that process. And I can go back in history and kind of see where I started and where I was as well compared to where I will be in the future. There's then also sharing without ego as well, learning with everyone, sharing with everyone as well. It's not really about kind of I'm this big expert who knows everything, because I really don't. It's just kind of, here I am, my name is Matt, and I'm sharing this journey and the photos, the successes, showing the figures and the awesome bits, that make people go, wow, that's, really, really good. But sharing those stories and kind of failures as well. The biggest advice, I get a lot of questions on Instagram around how do I get started in property investing. The number one best thing to do, I say this to everybody who asks me, is buy your own home first and do it up. There's a few reasons why. Number one, it's your own home, which is great. You can get out of the rental market. But also when you create value in a property and you do it up. So if you buy an old property and spend a little bit of cash, get a little bit of paint, do it up, pop in a nice kitchen, try and fit it yourself, and learn along the way. Everything is learnable these days. Everything is figure-outable, is one of the phrases that I like to follow. All of that capital gain in the property, because it's your main residence, is completely tax-free, which is a great way to build a pot of money. If you don't have much now, you can get stronger, higher loan-to-value mortgages if it's your own residential property. And that means that you can buy a bigger house and you can do it up, and you can gain all of that money completely tax-free. You can also gain the crucial experience of buying a house, going through conveyancing, working with a solicitor, learning how to fit a kitchen, fit a bathroom, how to knock down a wall, build a stud wall. Learn all of these skills because it will really, really help you. And because it's your own home, there's less pressure from lenders or whatever it is to kind of complete it and get it done. So you can do it in your own time, do it on weekends and evenings, and there's no kind of pressure on that one. And you can rinse and repeat that to build up capital in the business. So my journey of getting started. So I was going through this process of researching, analysing, checking out YouTube videos, listening to loads of podcasts. I attended a few networking events, and then kind of going back to the researching properties and just trying to get used to it. There's a bit of a build framework here, and this is learning the basics, creating your strategy, and then creating your habits and consistency off the back of that. That is how you get started. A lot of people procrastinate when it comes to building a property business, and they spend too much time reading articles, watching YouTube videos. The only way to get started is to start viewing properties and making offers on them, and that is how you start the business and start doing it. If you've got the cash, get out there, start talking to estate agents and start making offers. There's another trap where you can do loads of viewings but you're not making any offers. That's not going to work. If you're not making offers, you're not going to have an offer accepted. So you have to look at the market, get all your instant email alerts on Rightmove. You can set them up on your account, start viewing properties, start making offers after you analyse each property deal. Fun fact, a lot of property investors don't analyse their deals. They just buy them and don't really analyse them. So they don't know if they're going to make a loss. And I saw loads of properties sell for way more than what they were worth done up. And I know that those property investors who were bidding for them and then builders just didn't have a clue what they were doing. So you can put yourself miles above the competition just by doing that. There's also a really interesting graph, which is the plateau of latent potential. This is measuring time and results, and there's an expectation here. So that kind of straight diagonal line is what you think should happen over time with your results. You think it's like a linear line, so as time goes on, your results get bigger and better in a straight line. But the actual reality is that it kind of starts like a compounding curve. So you kind of it kind of slowly grows and kind of nothing happens over time, and then we start to curve up, and then it becomes exponential, and you start to benefit from compound growth. But in the middle, between the linear line and the curved kind of what actually happens, that gap in the middle is what is known as the valley of disappointment, and that is where your expectations are not met versus the results. And we're all guilty of falling into this trap every single time. So this is really crucial to understand this, that your expectations will be that it's a nice, easy, flat line, linear journey. What actually happens is kind of a bit of a squiggly mess, but it kind of curves and compounds. You really have to be in this for the long term, and this is a really great way to set your own expectations. So I wanted to choose my strategy, and there are lots of different strategies out there. You've got the vanilla buy-to-lets. This is simply buying a house and rent it out. Get your rent every single month, happy days. You can do a buy, refurb, refinance. This is through either using your own cash, doing it via a mortgage like I did, or using a bridging loan where you buy a house, it needs loads of work doing on it. You then refinance the bridging loan, and then you put it onto a kind of proper mortgage product, and you realise its value. So you could buy a house for 100k, might be worth 150 done up if you spend 15k on the refurb, and you get that bit that's left. So when you refinance it, you're kind of using that additional capital that you've built in the property towards the deposit. You can pull some of that cash out quicker because it's a capital intensive business. You need cash to keep going, and this is how you recycle money to keep going rather than just locking it into each property. Instead, buy a house on a bridging loan, do it up, realise its new value, refinance it as much out as possible, and use that cash to go again. You've then got HMOs, which is buying a house and renting it out by the room, so it's a more advanced version of buy-to-lets. Commercial to resi, there are loads of permitted development kind of rights from the government now and local councils to take old commercial buildings and convert them into residential, where you can take an old abandoned shop that's died on the high street and convert it into flats and then have a cool little kind of coffee shop on the bottom, whatever it is. So really exciting. I'd love to explore that in the future as well. Developments, you could do new builds or really massive heavy conversions with a big build team. Requires a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, and bigger lending products. You could also look at serviced accommodation, where you take a few flats in a city centre and use them as Airbnb short lets. You gain a lot more cash flow, but also it's more intensive on the expensive because you'll need cleaners to clean the property every single time. You'll need key management, how you're going to manage the keys and get them to the Airbnb guests, and just managing that customer service side of things. So it can be more time intensive. But I created a 3-part strategy off of understanding what are the property investing strategies overall. And my strategy is set into 3 phases. So number 1 is getting started. This is starting with a really simple buy-to-let. So tick, I've done that. A simple buy-to-let with a full renovation. So I've learned the process of getting a buy-to-let, getting tenants, managing tenants, but also managing a refurbishment project, making it also make a profit at the same time. It gives me 12-month landlord experience, which is important for phase 2. It's allowed me to build the systems in the business, the processes, all the automated forms and how everything works, and storing the data in my databases. Building a business is all about kind of processes and systems, and I've now done that. So the whole goal of phase 1 was to get started and manage a successful first project. So massive tick on that one. I'm now going to be moving into phase 2 later this year. This is the higher risk and higher return project, where I want to now I've kind of focused on getting started. Phase 2 is getting cash flow and scaling up the business. So I'm going to be working on student HMOs up in the north, ideally around like Sheffield, South Yorkshire. As long as you pick a university town, I think you're onto a winner, and obviously making sure you're aware of Article 4, which is where you can't convert a normal house into a HMO, so be aware of that. This is where you could make a house that could bring in £2,000 a month, and of which maybe £1,000 of that would be your profit after all the costs. For me, this is now about growing the team as well and getting more people in. And as I get more rooms and more HMOs, getting a kind of property manager in to help with the business and starting to grow the business properly here. So the goal of this phase is to begin building a higher cash flow in the business and scale it up. And then phase 3, which is I'd really like to get to this, is building luxury developments, and it's building company capital. So now I've got cash flow coming in. I want to focus on big lump sums of money now. The regular money comes in every single month, and this is building developments, conversions. It's high risk, but it's also high return, and will fully allow me to go full time and quit the 9 to 5 in the future. And from kind of getting started, getting cash flow and getting capital growth, when I've mastered the cash flow and the capital growth, there's 2 streams of income coming into the business, which will make a massive, massive difference. And the goals. So what I really wanted to do really is understand my goals in the business. This is really important to understanding your business as well. So for me, there were 6 main goals that I wanted to follow. So one was creating great products. I wanted to make sure that any house that I work on, any project, whether it's a refurbishment, whether it's a development, is the best product in the area, which means it's going to perform either through selling it or through renting it. And so far, testing that on project 1 has really, really proven true. I don't know why anyone would settle for a substandard project just for the sake of trying to cheapen the refurbishment, because if you're kind of thrifty with the way you have a refurbishment anyway and save money wherever you can, the benefit is that you'll still have a product that's worth more if you put a little bit more effort and time into it, and thinking about the interior design, thinking about layout and how everything is structured. Secondly was building a safety net. So for me, the goal really is to have something beneath me. So if I was ever let go from my job, or I was ill, or whatever it was that happened in life, there's something that is bringing in income where I'm not completely without any money in my life. And a business, I think some people see building a business as risky, but I see it as safer than having a job, because with a job you are working for someone else, and you can be let go at any minute and you lose all of that money and all of that income straight away, whereas a business, that's not going to happen. And if you manage it, if it's diversified, the business isn't just going to disappear tomorrow as well if you were ill, or whatever it was, and the business won't just let you go. It also kind of allows me to choose where I want to live, in a place where I want to live as well, and gives that kind of freedom and flexibility. It allows me to choose my own hours, and I like working, I enjoy it, and work long hours as it is already, but it means that if I want to take a day off, I can take a day off. If I want to take a long holiday, I don't have to ask permission for that. And I think that's the big difference, where you don't have to ask to have a day off, or ask to go away for a few weeks, or work abroad for a few weeks. That gives you that freedom and flexibility. It means there's no limits as well. You could be a top performer in your current job that you work in, and you will be kind of limited. There is a ceiling in every company, whether that's the role, whether it's salary, and there'll be someone above you who is the role above, and you can only jump as high as what your role will allow you to do. Whereas with a business, the harder you work and the more results you get are directly seen within the company finances and within the company success, which means you've got no limits. It's a limitless kind of climb up, and the more successful the business becomes, there's nothing that's going to stop it or get in the way by saying you're not ready to jump up to this next step yet. And as well, it allows me to work flexibly. So being able to work in a coffee shop and focus on some more of the digital side of the business, or working at home, or working on site. Having that choice rather than having to get on a train to work in London every single day. And I used to like the idea of going into London, whereas now going into London on a really hot, stuffy day, cramming myself on a tube, I think people love to hate it. And there is this kind of culture in London where people oh, I'm working in London, but you look at the reality, and I don't see anything pleasant about jumping on a stuffy tube and sitting in an office for 7-8 hours a day and buying £10 lunches. There's just nothing appealing about that. I think post-pandemic, it changed a lot of people's priorities, and some have gone back to that lifestyle, but definitely not a lifestyle for me. I want to wake up, go for a walk in the morning in the countryside, walk my dog, and have a easier, kind of less stressful life while running a kind of more successful business than what I'd ever do working in a kind of fixed 9-to-5 job in the rat race in the city. So what have I learned? Well, viewings are very overwhelming. So when you go around a house for the first time, you could be prepared, you can understand what to look for, but when you go around, there's just visually so much to take in, and it's really, really overwhelming. And one thing that I started doing was recording everything. So whenever you go and view a house, get your phone, hit record, make sure it's okay with the estate agent, and just kind of film everything as you go around, so that when you go home and you have time to kind of calm down from the excitement of a viewing, you can go back, you can watch the video, and as you're kind of analysing the property and starting to put figures and work out how much you want to offer on it, you can just go back and look through for any things you've missed. And I actually, for example, I didn't properly record the first property that I've worked on, and I only realised halfway through conveyancing that half the windows were single glazed, and I hadn't factored that into the cost. Now this is a few £1,000s worth of work that I had just missed because I was kind of overwhelmed at the time. I didn't take in every detail, and it's hard to then cost up a refurb if you're missing things. So recording it is very, very key. And then lastly is making serious offers. Especially in a very hot property market, there's a lot of kind of property gurus that will just teach you to get 25% below market value. Unless you're very, very, very lucky and you find a really unique deal, it is not going to happen with on-market properties. And most people get on-market properties with estate agents, which means you're bidding against other people and it's competitive. If you offer even 10% below, you'll probably get laughed out the door by estate agents. So just when it's this quick in the property market and the growth is huge, make serious offers, because even if you offer at the asking price, and let's say the market's going up 10% a year, if it takes 4 to 5 to 6 months to go through conveyancing anyway, you've still made 5% just by sitting and waiting during the conveyancing between the point of offer and getting the keys in the door, and then a few more months of doing the refurb. Just in this market alone, you'll have between 5 to 10% growth without even starting any refurb whatsoever. So don't get too bogged down. If you're talking about a few £1,000s, just get the deal and go for it, because starting sooner rather than later will be so much better. Interest rates are rising, property prices are going up, so there is a time cost opportunity here. And kind of going from this process of seeing the offer accepted was like, this is amazing. After all that hard work, I finally got the first kind of property. This is happening. This is real. It's in the company. This is really cool. I'm building a property big business, and you kind of go into this mindset of, this is awesome. I'm unstoppable. I can't wait to build the business, keep going. It's really great motivation. But then the reality sinks in of kind of like, oh crap, I've got this house and I've got to refurbishment. There's a lot of risk here. You got to do it up. And kind of from where we started, this was the state of the house as we were taking half of it back to brick. And, looking around, it was just felt like a monumental task. And it's funny because in hindsight now, I could easily do this again. It was very easy to do in hindsight. But at the time, it was like, there's an anxiety and a fear of getting this done and being very uneasy about the whole process. I estimated it would take 4 months to do the refurb. We probably did it in about 3 months. I had contingency up to 6. So actually, I did it in half the amount of time that I thought the maximum would take. And really, I got straight on the phone to trades, booking plasterers, joiners, roofers, getting a kitchen from Howdens, ordering the bathroom, problem solving. Felt like a mammoth task, and just kind of walking around, it just felt like we'd never get it done. It just felt like it was going on forever, and it felt like the longest 3 months ever. But then here are some more photos of the kind of in progress refurb. There are moments where you stop and you think, wow, it's starting to feel like a nice house now, because going from the really old, nasty, kind of manky bathroom to actually seeing like the plaster, like when it was boarded, it felt a lot warmer and nicer. The plaster completely changed it. Getting the spotlights put in was amazing. Little milestones. Celebrate all those steps. When I started tiling on the left there, that was Christmas Eve that I started doing that. It was kind of through the freezing winter months. Just seeing tiles go on the wall, those little things that transform a room and start to make it look like a home again, feels great. And celebrate those moments, because you realise you've actually come a long way from kind of where you started on the project. And even the same with the kitchen, painting the walls and getting the kitchen put in and tiled, just celebrate those big wins, because it really transforms a room. And, we ended up with an awesome house, going from a nasty, really dirty house to seeing it fully carpeted. I remember I literally laid down in the middle of the carpet and I was like, looked up at the ceiling. I'm like, I've done it. I've finally done this. Amazing house, beautiful, warm, cozy. And from where it was freezing and cold in the winter with no heating when we were doing it up, to having a nice kind of sun beaming through the window on the nice clean new carpet, it was just a really, really nice feeling. And it kind of takes you from when the refurb's done, from the kind of like, oh crap moment, to actually I'm unstoppable again. And it puts you back in that mindset. So getting it done is also really motivational. From all of that research, all of those podcasts, YouTube videos, trying to get started and thinking about starting but procrastinating, being blocked by COVID, seeing that point where I had tenants moving in was really, really satisfying. And I think that's the most rewarding part of the business. And I now can't wait to do this again. It's very easy to view properties and back out because they're not perfect. The perfect deal doesn't exist. You just have to see the potential, have a vision, and stick to that vision. Make sure you work out your numbers. If it feels safe, if you've got contingency, if you know you've got like escape routes if you need them, then go for it, because the only person stopping you is yourself in this whole journey. The proof is in the pudding with the figures. I mentioned that we had 75 inquiries. From those 75, I vetted loads of people and offered 10 viewings. I didn't want to do tens and tens of viewings. I had one final kind of offer given to the best tenants, the highest rent in the area. I've got prime quality tenants who are going to stay there for a very, very long time. Lovely family with 2 kids. My all-in cost, so this is the mortgage and the refurb, the legal costs, etc., was 130,000. It's worth between 175 to 180, and obviously that's going up all the time at the moment. I think by the time I get to the annual accounts, it'll be 180, because that area is surging right now. It's going 10% plus a year, which means that's now 18 grand a year just kind of being put into my pocket through the asset. So all in, I made a profit, pre-tax profit of £44,500. Equity in the business, that includes the director's loan, is £94,500. Again, at the end of the year, with the additional GDV and the rental income that isn't included in that figure, that'll be over £100,000, which means the return on investment is 90%, which is huge compared to a cash ISA in 12 months that offers 2%. 2% versus 90%, which I mentioned at the beginning, comparing them, is massive and shows the potential of this kind of whole business. So for me, hugely successful. A little bit, some of the figures are a little bit of a fluke. It's not, this isn't doable every time, and I'm sure I'll have other projects that don't do as well, but I'm really happy with this. And really, I also wanted to mention, because I'm the kind of nerdy tech side of it, I wanted to build my systems and processes, and the way I did it was I advertised on OpenRent through which puts it onto Rightmove and Zoopla to help advertise the property to everyone in the area. People get alerts. It helps bring interest into the property. I then used drop forms to capture data. So OpenRent would send an automated message saying, hey, please fill in this message. And that was great because it weeded out anyone who couldn't be bothered, who wasn't serious enough to fill out the form and tell me how much are you earning, what's your job, who's your employer, have you got any CCJs. If they weren't bothered to fill it in, I'm not interested. So I know that I don't need to offer it to them. I then had Zapier, which is an automation platform, would take all of the drop form stuff, put it into Notion so I could analyze it. I then offered the 10 viewings. I did that through Calendly. So I just then sent everyone an email saying, hey, you've been successful in getting a viewing for this property. Please book in here. Fully automated. They could book in their own viewings on the dates that I allowed. So I allowed a Friday and a Saturday. And it sends them the automatic calendar invite. It gives them email reminders, and also 2 hours before the viewing sends them a text message as well. So all of the thing fully automated here. And this is the bit I love about building businesses. HubSpot I used as the CRM to send all the emails, so they're professionally branded, looked amazing. Would send the kind of nice shiny branded email to them saying, hey, you've been successful, click here to book in your link. And I'm not then kind of faffing about saying, when are you free? I'm free these times, are you free these times? It's all automated, takes away that strain from the business. I use Notion as a CRM, so I use that to kind of store all the data. I have the tenant portal there as well, so they have like a mini kind of website that they can publicly access that has information for like maintenance requests, important numbers, the address of the property, a link to a Google Drive with all their certificates for gas safety and electrical safety, etc., the tenancy agreement. We signed everything through Joro, another cool piece of tech which you can kind of write as like a what you see is what you get type word editor, or you can import a PDF that means that I could sign it, I could make it look really pretty, send it to their email address. They also then sign all the documentation, fully automated. Means we don't need to sign wet signatures and send papers about, post them around. It's all digital, seamless, all automated. The rent is then taken from Go Cardless through a direct debit. There's always a debate around, do you take standing orders, do you take direct debits? For me, I want to take the kind of decisioning away from the tenants. Instead, they set up the mandate, and then I can just charge them every single month, fully automated. That automatically syncs into Xero, which is my accounting software, to reconcile all the money that comes through as well. There's obviously small fees that I pay for, like Go Cardless, for example. The rest of it's free. I also pay for Xero as well. And with OpenRent, I also pay to reference the tenants as well and do all the background and credit checks on them. So really, take some inspiration from this as well of building an automated business, and rather than just looking at a simple kind of amateur buy-to-let landlord. Instead, if you want to be building a serious business, you need to build scalability into your business, and that's what I did here. So what's next? Well, we're working on a personal home renovation with my other half, and we've just bought a house at 680k purchase price. Next door is worth about between 1.1 to 1.3 million, which is unbelievable. They have an incredible house. I think this one done up probably now in today's market is worth about $1 million. I think it's going to take a year or two to do it up anyway. So that plus the growth in the property market could be worth well over 1 million for the house when it's fully done up, with a huge kitchen, extension, with a huge loft conversion, a brand new frontage to the property as well. It's a massive project and should give, even at those figures, 173k profit and a 50% return on investment. But again, I think because we've got a 5-year mortgage on this, by the end of the mortgage, that'll be probably way above those figures until we kind of hit the next property crash, probably in 2026. Then I'll be working on Project 3, which is HMO1. So this is going to be a premium student HMO. This is now the cash flow side of the business. I'll be kind of renovating it and self-managing it. And then really it's continuing, not giving up. And, the hardest person to beat is the person who doesn't stop. And I'm going to keep building up those habits, sticking to them, and building up the company money over time, continuing to save, start to look at working with private investors as well and bringing more money into the company to work and build my experience in property and business with other people's money to kind of help them build up property projects as well. And development opportunity in the future, looking at plots of land, commercial to residential, and building up that kind of capital side of the business. So I really kind of can't wait to build it further, and I'll document all of this through What the Flip Property Investing, propertyinvesting.io, and on the YouTube channel as well. Just search Matt Brighton and you'll definitely find a lot of the videos on there. So I hope you found this useful and an inspiration of what it takes to go from 0 to 1 and starting a business and kind of going through that very first property deal. And I'll be recording a few more of these as kind of time goes on as well. But I hope you found this useful. Keep it for safekeeping. Feel free to play it a few times. Check out the YouTube channel and on propertyinvesting.io as well. We've got loads of free resources and free content. And I will see you at some point in the future.